All right. And we are on December 15th. We're in a conversation between Mukherjee and the master. And they've been talking about a lot of things. I'm doing several different uh, classes on on the gospel. And so I've got my book, I've got the book for Switzerland and the book for here. So it's hard to remember where we stopped. But he was talking about how, this universe, there's good and evil in this universe, but Brahman is like the air and is unaffected by bad smells, So Brahman carries the ideas of good and evil. They are certainly in that realm, but but you really can't say anything. Does anybody know what page we're on? I don't have a hard copy, so I'm on a PDF. If anybody knows what page, they can put that in the chat.
342 is what I have.
342, Sarah comes to bat. Awesome. Page 342. And we're at the line where Mr. Mukherjee is asking, why does one deviate from the path of yoga? Great question. Why do we deviate from the path of yoga? That it's hard to say. A lot of it is to do with habit. You've got some scars, I guess we call them, just ways of doing things, ways of thinking, ways to reacting to things. And when a condition comes up, some sort of sensual impulse, for instance, when I got in trouble for going out for that cup of coffee in San Francisco when Swami was in India, and the nuns tattled on me, and I got in trouble when Swami came back. And the reason that he said that it wasn't a good idea for me to go to a cafe is he said, you have no idea what samskaras are lurking there for you, what conditions that might trigger a habitual response on your part, and so you have to be careful as a seeker to consider your environment and your associations with that environment. And so falling from our deviating from our spiritual path quite often is triggered by that. We do something that triggers a habit or a memory, and we identify with that memory or that habit, and it gathers momentum and then manifests as an action. And that can be a fall, or that can be a deviation from our path of yoga. So that's why it's very important to be present in the moment, not just so that you can experience God in the moment, although that's more than enough. It's also a good idea to be aware of what you're doing in the moment, because you're creating your samskaras for tomorrow. And so if you're creating good habits today, you'll have a better tomorrow. And so it's a wonderful way to work through our stuff, actually. When you are considering an action, it's always good to consider what karma does it bring with it. Because all desires, when you fulfill them, they lay down some mess that has to be picked up tomorrow. And it's good to consider that before you jump in and do it, actually with all actions, but certainly actions that fulfill a desire. It's very good to sit and contemplate. Swami Prabhupada would never act in the moment on anything. He would never consider a deadline for making that decision either. He would wait until he knew the answer. And he would consider all the angles, because once he would start doing something, he wouldn't stop. He really had that way about him. If he started a new class, he would do it only after long consideration. And after that consideration, if it deemed that the class would go, he would put that class on even if nobody came. He would just, that's the way he was. Very methodical. So let's see what Thakur says here. Why does one deviate from the path of yoga? Master, as the saying goes, in my mother's womb, I was in the state of yoga. Coming into the world, I have eaten its clay. The midwife has cut one shackle, the navel cord, but how shall I cut the shackle of Maya? right? So Maya is this whole notion. I mean, Maya comes into being with egoism, right? And what is egoism? We know that's when we identify with mind, or another way of saying that, we identify with our thoughts and our thought patterns. And those thoughts and patterns that we identify with are what we call attachments. So your attachments really create your samskaras. And this is Maya. You know, when you become something that you're not, meaning when you become this particular body and this particular mind, then the universe is disjointed, becomes the way I like to think about it. You know, the ultimate truth of the matter is that thou art that. You are the divine. And so you're the king, right? And if the king walks into the room and wants to pretend that he's one of the servers, one of the slaves, then he has to dress that way, and he walks in there, begins acting that way, and then he's the king. So everybody else in the room, all the court, all the others, everybody has to change their idea and start treating him like one of the servants now, because he's decided that he's coming here and he's going to be a servant for the night. So everybody has to rearrange their parts to view the king as being a servant. And so basically, this is what happens. The universe has to completely rearrange itself when you decide you're a particular. When you're a person, this body and this mind, that God, you are the divine, and you've stepped into a disguise because of your ignorance, actually, your forgetfulness, and have now become this particular body mind. And so from the perspective of this body mind, the whole universe has to rearrange itself because you're the king, deciding that you're going to play the role as a deluded person. And so the whole universe reorients itself to encourage you in your game, to let you believe that you are this body and this mind. And so the universe arises, and that is Maya. You know, the story that you believe, the story that you hold on to define yourself in this world as a participant in this world, whatever story that is your Maya. And your ego collects these stories. Your ego holds on to these stories. Your ego is constantly generating new stories that tell you that you're in control, that tell you that you are in fact small and weak, that you are limited and of the finite world, and that you are material and not spiritual. And so that is Maya. That is what we think this world is. And that is what the illusion is. It's not that there's nothing out there. It's not that there is nothing out there. There is something out there, but what is out there is not what you think it is. What you think it is what we call Maya. What it is what we call Brahman, that pure mind, God. So as the saying goes, right? And so we're born, when we're in the mother's womb, we're in a state of yoga. We don't have a body that we've identified yet. We don't have a separateness that we've identified with yet. We're in the silent lap of the mother, literally in the womb of the mother. So we're in a state of yoga, a state of contemplation, perhaps. And then we're born into the world and we eat its clay, meaning what? We take the body as our own. So we eat the clay of this world. And then the cord is cut. But how shall we cut this delusion that we're under now? How shall we cut this wrong notion that we are this body and mind? Maya is nothing but lust and greed, woman and gold, man and gold for our feminine or gay counterparts out there. Maya is nothing but lust and greed. A man attains to yoga when he has freed his mind from these two, freeing your mind from lust and freeing your mind from greed. Now, what's the generalized way of saying that? That's freeing your mind from me and mine, right? Because nothing encourages us to think like a body, as nothing encourages us to think that way as well as lust does. With lust, you have to deeply believe in your body, right? And to enjoy lust, you have to only believe in the body. You leave all of your other thoughts apart from that, and you throw all of your ID into being a man, into being a woman, into that. And Ramakrishna says that all of Maya comes from just the seeds of lust and greed, right? Because it's the seeds of lust that make you consider whether somebody is male or female. It's the seed of lust that makes you consider whether somebody is beautiful or ugly. It's the seed of lust that makes you consider whether somebody is wealthy or poor, right? Of course, greed also does that. And greed is just the gravity of thinking that you're an individual. You start desiring everything because your nature is infinite. You see, you are in fact still the king. And so you still have a notion of your kingliness, but you've entered the world of a pauper. But you still bring in that idea of your infinite wealth, your immortality, your infinite power. All of those notions are still within you because those are your true nature. And so you go about trying to reconstruct them in the finite world, right? And that's what desire is. Desire is you trying to reconstruct your nature in the finite world, the material world. And it can't be done, but we give it our best 1-2 anyway. And we keep doing that until we realize it can't be done. And once we come to that, then we reach a desperation where we fall down and weep before God, before the divine, before our true self, actually. And we cry, I can't do this. I've tried everything. Mother, please save me. And in the earnestness of that, we find our freedom. So Maya is nothing but this notion of being me and mine, this notion of wanting, of needing something to attain to our nature, this nagging sense or intuition that we know these things. We know immortality, we know infinity, we know freedom, we know deathlessness. We know these things, and yet we can't figure out how we know them, but we're driven to manifest them. So Maya is nothing but woman in gold, lust and greed. A man attains yoga when he has freed his mind from these two. The self, the supreme self, is the magnet, right? And where is that supreme self? It's within you. Actually, everything is that supreme self, but our access to it is within us, within the body, in the shrine of the heart, right? That's the magnet. So that's where we go to get our orientation. We withdraw from body, we withdraw from mind, we assemble in the heart, assemble in the shrine with the thought of the beloved, in the company of the beloved. So that is the magnet. And then the individualized self, this deluded self, the self that has dressed up as a pauper for the evening, is the needle. And so it gets attracted toward God. It gets attracted toward spirituality. It starts investigating and moving in that direction. And as it does that, the mind begins to purify, and that attraction ever increases as the mud is washed off of the needle. The individual self experiences the state of yoga when it is attracted by the supreme self to itself, right? So when we are in that state where the self is attracted to the self, in one sense, it's almost like an infinite loop. When you love for its own sake, that leads to ecstasy. That leads to a knowledge of who you are. But the magnet cannot attract the needle if the needle is covered with clay, right? That's covered with that clay is that identity. You're identifying with being material. So that's what. And to the degree that you believe yourself to be material, to be this form, to that degree, Maya has control over you. And to that degree, your needle doesn't work. You can't quite tell, well, how do I get back? How do I know God, right? But the magnet cannot attract the needle if the needle is covered with clay. It can draw the needle only when the clay is removed. The clay of woman in gold must be removed. This whole idea of being separate and apart from the whole is what we have to surrender. So that's why we do things without looking for their results, right? Because that takes us out of the time-space causation continuum that traps us in the mind. So we stay present in the moment, right? So that's what breaks down the ego, because the ego is composed completely of the past, right? So being present is denying the ego. Being present is becoming aware of the nature of the self, right? We start to see how the mind works and how the mind holds us captive through this whole idea of causation, through this whole idea of presenting a constant string of desires that really describe our true self as we try to remake it in the material world. These are the traps of being. These are the traps that keep us from knowing, from being able to see over the lip of the mind to the infinity of what we are. It keeps us identified, holding on to these attributes. And it does it because the moment that we identified with body, we became afraid, we became terrified. Because this body is very small when you compare it to the universe. It's constantly in danger. And so we intrinsically know this as we identify with body. And so we've constructed this little boat of an ego, which doesn't really exist, but it gives us a sense of boundary. It's what tells us this is me and that's not me. And we surround ourselves with things that we think we know, and we convince ourselves through multiple stories that run through our mind constantly that we're in control. And so that gives us some sense of safety. That gives us some sense of knowledge and understanding about where and what we are. And we cling to that very, very tightly, because to let go of the branch that you're holding on to when you can't see what's down below your feet is a very hard thing to do. Very difficult thing to do. Mukherjee, how can one remove it? How do we remove this lust and greed, this notion of self, smaller self? Master, weep for God. Weep for God with a longing heart. That's how, right? Sit as best you can, find that shrine within your heart and sit in that presence of love and let that do its work on you. That will bring tears. That will bring tears of joy, tears of longing, tears of wonder, tears of gratefulness, but it will bring tears. So weep for God with a longing heart. Tears shed for him will wash away the clay. Right? When you have thus freed yourself from impurity, you will be attracted by the magnet. Only then will you attain yoga. Right? So how far along are we? Well, how unselfish are we? How loving are we? You know, how attracted to our yoga are we? Do we enjoy our meditations? Do we enjoy our readings? Do we enjoy the beloved? Right? Mukherjee, priceless words. Master, if a man is able to weep for God, he will see him. He will go into samadhi. Perfection in yoga is samadhi. A man achieves kumbhaka without any yogic exercise if he but weeps for God. The next stage is samadhi. Right? So this is really tuning the heart toward the beloved, toward the divine. We can only come to this state through grace, really. But we season that grace, we get ourselves prepared for that grace just by looking at the divine when he has come. We study the life of Jesus. You know, Jesus inspires an immense amount of love. We study the life of Krishna. Krishna inspires an immense amount of love. You know, we read the life of Buddha. He inspires that same infinite amount of love in us. And so this is how we prepare ourselves, how we prepare our mind to hold that kind of love, to become aware of that kind of love. And then through our practice, we experience it. Through our practice, we touch that love. Through our practice, we become aware of that constant hum of bliss that is in being, that's in our existence. By withdrawing from mind, we begin to hear it because we let go of the noise of constant change that's in the mind. Right? So a man achieves kumbhaka without any yogic exercise if he but weeps for God. right? If you can really sit there, expose yourself to the divine, and weep for God, the Thakur right here is telling you, if you can weep for God, you will see him, and that it has nothing to do with how hard you've practiced. It has nothing to do with your yogic exercise at all, is what he's saying here. He says that the man can achieve kumbhaka without any yogic exercise, if he but weeps for God. Now, of course, that yogic exercise will contribute to your ability to weep for God, because it will help you in your single-mindedness. It will help you in your discipline and your self-control, so that you're not distracted by this world of Maya that you've created, and you can distinguish yourself from it. You don't accept the stories of yourself that the mind tells you, and that gives you a certain amount of power to withdraw from mind. There is another method, that of meditation. In the Sahasrara, Shiva manifests himself in the special manner. The aspirant should meditate on him. The body is like a tray. The mind and buddhi are like water. The sun of Satchit Ananda is reflected in this water. Meditating on the reflected sun, one sees the real sun through the grace of God. Yeah, so this reflection of the divine image within, that's when you think of Thakur, that is the reflection of God in mind, right? And so you try and see Thakur or Ma or whoever your chosen ideal is, Jesus, Buddha, Rama, Krishna, any of those and more. You take your highest ideal and you focus the mind on that. You're focusing on the reflection. And as you focus on that reflection, you become aware in time that it's your reflection that you are seeing. That's why, I don't know, well, one of the teachings that I've heard for meditation is when you meditate on your chosen ideal, that chosen ideal should be sitting in your body facing the same way you are, right? That in one practice, as you do that, then you become increasingly aware that body within the mind's sphere that's sitting and facing the same direction in you, ultimately you get absorbed in that. And that's the realization that we're hoping for, is that reflection of God, that reflection of Ramakrishna or Jesus or Buddha within you is actually your true nature. And by meditating on that, you slowly begin to align. You move everything gets moved until it lines up perfectly with the self, right? And in that is your freedom. So this method, you meditate on Shiva, meditate on your highest ideal in a special manner. The body is like a tray with water in it, right? And that water actually is mind. Mind is what you are reflected in. So all that you actually are seeing at this moment is your reflection as the divine self. Now, our egoism is what has broken it up into a story that says, no, that's a bed, and no, that's some art, and no, that's a window, and no, that's another person, oh, no, that's this. We break everything into forms because it comes to us through 5 disparate senses broken into pieces. And then that gets filtered through our mind, time, space, causation, and relational thinking. And as we apply all of that to these broken up images of God that came in through the senses, we create a universe with ourself at the center, right? With our egoistic self at the center. And then we get lost because we feel like we're in the world. We don't have that understanding that the world is within us, quite literally. Just like at night when you dream, you believe yourself to be in the dream, but in reality, that dream is within you. You are the container of that dream. And so we are in that exact situation at this very moment. We believe ourselves to be in this world. I believe myself to be sitting in this chair in front of a camera talking to you. But in fact, all of this is happening within me, right? This is all my story, or your story is the same, just from a different vantage point. And the self that is listening to that story in you and in me is the same self. We are not separate. And if we could turn around and look in, if all of us could right now take a metaphorical 180-degree turn inward, and all of us take one step inward at the same time, we would all bump into each other, because we are all circled around a singular self that is radiating pure love, pure wisdom, pure being, and going and radiating through multiple small minds, multiple sections of the universal mind, really. And each one of those sections of the universal mind then is turning around and looking outward, believing itself to be a singular, even though it's really using the universal mind to work in that sense. So the mind is like that tray, it reflects, and the buddhi, the mind and the buddhi are like the water. They reflect that sun of Satchitananda that's there. Meditating on that reflected sun, meditating on your highest ideal, one sees the real sun through the grace of God, right? Through the grace of God is very, very important, because if you think you're the one doing it, you're exercising your ego. And if you're exercising your ego, that water can't settle. You can't see the singular reflection in it. You're going to see lots of shards of the reflected self, which is what we're looking at. All these shards, this multiplicity, whatever we think of as separate and apart from ourselves, is just a reflection of God in a disturbed mind, in a disturbed lake. So like that moon at night reflecting in the water. If the water is flat and still, you can see the moon and recognize it. Oh, look at that beautiful reflection of the moon, right? But if there's me and mine, in that lake, then that lake is unsettled. And you're not going to see a moon in it. You're going to see thousands of shards of white light, but you're not going to have any idea that that's the moon. It doesn't look anything like the moon. And so you'll come up with names and forms out of each one of those, and that will be the universe that you inhabit. But the worldly man must constantly live in the company of holy men, right? You have to be around people that don't believe that they are individuals and that they're separate and apart from God, right? Because then we stop reinforcing those wrong ideas in each other. That's the value of holy company. It's not that we're perfect, but we're at least moving in the same direction. And so through using that momentum, that shared momentum of all of us moving in the same direction toward realization, it's like riding your bike behind a semi truck. You get caught in that wind vortex, you don't have to pedal as hard. So for us, that truck that we're following is our highest ideal. It's the thought of Jesus, the thought of Rama, the thought of Ramakrishna, the thought of Holy Mother, right? The thought of God. So the worldly man must constantly live in the company of holy men. It is necessary for all, even for a sannyasin. But it is especially necessary for the householder. His disease has become chronic because he has to live constantly in the midst of lust and greed, right? So that's the challenge of being a householder, is that you are living in the midst of the world, which is created by lust and greed, which manifests because of lust and greed, because of the seeds of lust and greed, of me and mine, right? And so living in that all the time, you're reinforced in your wrong thinking all the time, because everybody you're working with is running full headlong force into that delusion, into that story of being a body mind. So they want to be a rich body mind. They want to be a beautiful body mind. They want to be a young body mind. They want to be the best body and mind, the biggest body and mind, whatever. They want to be the Lord in body form is really what everybody's after, right? They all that money they're seeking is just a metaphor for the power of being God. All those relationships, all of that they're seeking is the unity of the self they're trying to build through the world, right? All of that. What else is there out there? What do we run after? All of that pleasure is to try and reconstruct that hum of bliss of the pure mind, right? All of that working out and staying healthy and, eating right, all of that is an attempt to get that immortality underway so that we can manifest the immortality of our divine self. And we chuckle at that for good reason. But the really funny thing about it is that we really don't believe in our death. We really don't believe we're going to die. And that also is a leftover of bringing our true nature into this finite projection, right? I asked Rama one time, I was, when I read Ramana Maharshi for the first time, and in the introduction to his book, he told the story about how when he was a teenager, he was terrified of death. And so he wanted to confront that fear. And so he laid down on the floor and he just imagined dying very methodically, very clearly. He brought himself to think through his own death. And when he did that, he had his realization. He went into samadhi. And so, of course, me being a young brahmachari, I thought, I'm going to do that too and get this taken care of this afternoon before dinner, and I'll be free by evening meal. So I went up and I laid on my floor and I tried to imagine my death, and I just couldn't get anywhere. I think I fell asleep once or twice. But when I got down to the dinner table, I said to Ramakrishna, I said to Swami Prabhutananda, as a Maharaj, I said, I tried to do exactly what Ramana Maharshi did, and he got realization. I got a nap. What? what's the difference? Why can't I realize God? Why can't I imagine myself dying? And I was thinking he was going to give me some sort of explanation that would help me out in that direction, but it really didn't help me in that direction. He just told me something very interesting. He said, well, of course it's impossible for you to imagine your own death. He said, because you have never died and will never die. And he said, you have never been born and you will never be born. And so to imagine either of those is going to be impossible for you. The reason that none of us think we're going to die is because in truth, we're never going to die. But because we think that we're body minds, we think that means the body mind will never die. He says, so you see, it's a step beyond just imagining your own death. It's coming to the realization that you will never die, that there's an awareness in there that is you, that is not connected to a body. It does not have a geolocation. It does not have a singular center. That's delusion, to think that you've got an infinite radius from a singular center. He says, what you are truly, you are an infinite radius with an infinite number of centers. There is not one that is you. So the worldly man must constantly live in the company of holy men. It is necessary for all, even for sannyasins. All right, so this is not an option. Find yourself a band of holy people to hang out with. This is a good one, although we can't be online 24/7, but develop for yourself a circle of people who are seekers. Find some holy company and dedicate yourself to being with those people. Because Ramakrishna here, he's saying it is especially necessary. Well, it's necessary for everyone, sannyasins and householders, but it is especially necessary for the householder. So spiritual company is not an option. It's absolutely necessary, Ramakrishna is saying. Find yourself some spiritual company. They don't all have to be of the exact same belief systems and whatnots, but they do have to have a broad mind, a general mind, so that they don't waste time trying to get everybody on the same path. Everybody can be on their path and encourage each other in that way. Go forward. His disease has become chronic because he has to live constantly in the midst of woman in gold, right? And this is something to consider about your practice. We might do, let's say if we're doing a great practice, what would be a great practice? Oh, we meditate for an hour and a half, 3 times a day. Wow, that would be a great practice, right? And so we think that that's it, that's doing well. Well, if you do 3 times 3 and 3 times 1.5 is 4.5 hours a day that you'll be thinking about God. Now, what are you doing with the other 19.5 hours? You're reinforcing your delusion. You're reinforcing all of your ideas as a body and mind. So really, your practice isn't going to get you there. One, because you're barely doing any, right? But two, because it's pushing against a current. It's like you're keeping the refrigerator door open. Really, that's what you're doing. Your practice is trying to keep the fridge cold, but you're keeping the door open because you're hanging out, in the rest of the house, whatever. I don't know if that's going to work as a metaphor, but take it and run with it anyway. Just understand that this is why our practice has to spill over the bounds of our time. Your practice is not an hour and a half in the morning and an hour at lunch and an hour and a half at dinner. Those are just points of intensity where you're really trying to just sit down and just do that. But your practice doesn't have a limit on it. Your mantra should be going all day long. And any time that you realize it stopped, you should bring yourself back to it. Your prayer is constant. Your prayer never ends. You begin to realize that every action and every thought is a prayer. And so you work at becoming aware of every thought and every action so that you can know what your prayer is. And you can make sure to pray the right prayer. I want to be free. But make sure that your words and your actions back that prayer up, because Mother answers all of your prayers. She says yes to all of them, but she says yes in the proportion in which they were prayed. So if you've got one prayer for freedom and 10 prayers for French fries, you're probably going to get the French fries and not get the freedom. And you'd be like, but I prayed for freedom. And Mother was like, oh yeah, there was a tiny little prayer in there for something. Was that what it was for? For your freedom? And so this is where our single-mindedness comes from. This is where it comes from. What is the single-mindedness? That awareness of God, that awareness that your life is a prayer. And what does that bring with it? A great sense of joy, a great sense of wonder and freedom, because your life turns into a dance. Your life becomes your conversation with God. Every action and its reaction, every effort and its fulfillment, all becomes a dance. And you're the follower, right? You're the follower in the dance. And so you really have to relax yourself, surrender in. I don't know if any of you do ballroom dancing. I had to learn when I was in a play once. And that when you're I had to learn to lead and to follow. And so when you are following, you have to really relax into your partner's mind, really, their body mind, so that when they make the slightest efforts, you go. You know when to spin, you know when they're going to flip you into twirls, you know when they're going to step with their right foot, because you are in tune with them. You have surrendered yourself to them. You are the follower. And so in this dance of life, same thing. You're constantly aware of God. Why? Because he's your leading dance partner and he's going to move, and you want to be aware. And it's not you that gets to choose how that dance goes. That doesn't work if there's two leaders. You need to follow, and you need to be a great follower. And that following is delightful when you can really, especially for a waltz, if you don't mind my talking about that for a moment. In a waltz, it's just wonderful to follow in a waltz and just hear that music going, and you're not stepping on anybody's feet, and everything is happening in tune and harmony with the music going on. That's the beauty of dancing. That's the fun of dancing. And in the same way, that's the fun of life. When you begin to understand that, one, you're on the dance floor, you are right here in the waltz of the divine, and you come to realize that your chosen ideal is your beloved, your chosen partner, and that your life is that dance. And when you become to see that, then the fun begins, then the enjoyment begins, then the purification of mind and body begins. And little by little, we come into that unity. Mukherjee, yes, sir, the disease has indeed become chronic. Yes, our wrong thinking has indeed become chronic. Master, give God your power of attorney. Stop thinking about it. Stop thinking about yourself and defining yourself by your journey, your struggles, your problems, whether you're good at meditating, bad at meditating. Forget it. Don't enter in with that. This is not an egoistic exercise. This is not something you're going to be able to do, so don't employ your ego in doing it. This is a surrender. This is a surrendering. Give your power of attorney to God. That means don't you make a single move without asking God's permission, right? Don't you make a single decision without going to the mother and laying it out before her. Don't make a single plan without considering your divine nature, without considering your dance, without considering that you are a follower to your lead, right? So give your power of attorney to God. This is how we get past it. Don't start wondering about how good of a dancer you are. Don't start wondering what you look like to everybody else that's dancing. Don't you worry about, whether you're a good twirler or not. You just surrender to the movement of your partner and enjoy the dance. And don't forget ever that you're dancing. So give God the power of attorney. Let him do whatever he wants. That's the practice of non-resistance, right? If he starts to move you to the right, don't you dare tug to the left. Right? You're going to step on his feet, or he's going to step on yours, or you're going to step on each other's, and you're going to fall down and get tangled in a ball gown. Nothing's more humiliating. Nothing's more humiliating. So be careful, be alert, be surrendered. Be like a kitten and cry to him with a fervent heart, right? The mother cat puts the kitten wherever she wants to. The kitten doesn't know anything. It is left sometimes on the bed and sometimes near the hearth. Mukherjee. It is good to read sacred books like the Gita. Master. But what will you gain by mere reading? Right? It's like, yeah, it's true. Holy books are a form of holy company, and they can be a workable substitute. If you don't have any holy company to hang out with, you can hang out with Krishna and the Gopi girls in the Gita. You can hang out with Jesus in the New Testament. You can hang out with Buddha and the Dhammapada. You can get your company that way. But he says, what will you gain by mere reading? Don't think that just spending time reading and putting these things into your head is going to do it. He says, some have heard of milk and some have seen it, and there are some besides who have drunk it. God can indeed be seen. What is more, one can talk to him. See what he's doing here? He's saying your life is not about your practice. Your religion is not the point of your life. Talking to God, experiencing God, knowing God, dancing with the beloved, that is the purpose of your life. Pick a religion. I don't care which one it is. Pick a path and go. You be truthful, you be sincere, you be earnest, and you focus on love, and you're fine. Dance, dance, and dance, right? Go. Don't get involved in the particulars. Don't think that your religion is the important thing. Don't think that your practice is the important thing. There's the one most important thing, and that is love. That is love, and that's the dance we're learning. That's the dance we're doing. And so until we've seen God, we haven't fulfilled the point of our life. Until we've touched the beloved, only then is life fulfilled. But what will you gain by mere reading? Some have heard of milk, right? We've heard of God. We've heard lots of different things about God. Some have seen it, right? Some have seen. And there are some besides who have drunk it, who have made it themselves, made it part of themselves, who have imbibed it, right? So it's not a religion in the mind. It's a religion that has seeped down into the heart, and it affects you. You are different, right? You are loving. You are compassionate. You're forgiving. You're caring. You're proactive in service. you're aware, and you're always ready. God can indeed be seen. What is more, one can talk to him. The first stage is that of the beginner. He studies and hears, right? We do these classes together. We read the books together. We do some karma yoga. We try and exercise these things in our life. The second is the stage of the struggling aspirant, right? Where we're just trying to overcome our bad habits. We're trying to supersede our wrong thinking with right thinking. We're arguing. There's a lot of turmoil inside in this period. You know, lots of wrestling, lots of suffering, lots of insecurity. Sometimes our faith gets severely challenged. Sometimes we don't believe things are the way the scriptures have said. The world seems so convincing as our story. And so there's lots of pain, but we keep getting up and we keep going forward and we just keep our determination set. The stage of the struggling aspirant, he prays to God, he meditates on him, and he sings his name and his glories. The third stage, this is a big jump. You could probably put at least 45 other stages in here. But the third stage is that of the perfect soul, right? The perfect soul, he has seen God. He has realized him directly, right? Directly. Directly means not through the body and mind, not through the senses. No, there's a knowing God that is richer, more real than your senses are. There is a knowing of God that is more real and more intimate than your thoughts, right? This is that final stage when God is more real than the world you live in, when God is closer to you than your own body, when God is closer to you than your thoughts. This is when you're beginning to know. This is when the mind is being purified. He has seen God, realized him directly and immediately in his inner consciousness, right? This is an experience that will leave you changed forever. Because the first time that you experience something that comes to you directly and not through body and not through mind, it is so bright and so rich and so deep and so absolute. You're forever changed. You can never go back to what you were before that happened, because you can never again believe that this world is real, because you've touched something real. You've heard something real. Not through the senses, though, not through the mind. This is what happens in the silence of meditation. This is what happens in that interior space where you suddenly know. You don't know partial, you know completely. And it's already, it is you. It's no longer referential. It's no longer over there and you have to reach at it to touch it. It's you. It's at the very center of your being. He has seen God, realized him directly and immediately in his inner consciousness, right? Directly and immediately. Directly because there's no interface. There's no senses. There's no mind to interpret and give meaning to the senses. None of that is involved. This is a knowing according to your nature. And immediately, it's in the moment. There's no past or future. There is this immediate isness, this presence. We will only know it when we know it. There is no description because we can only describe things of the senses. A description of something that doesn't come through the senses can't be done. Last is the stage of the supremely perfect, like Chaitanya. Such a devotee establishes a definite relationship with God, looking on him as his son or as his beloved, right? Or as his mother, or as his daughter, or as his friend. This is when you've drunk milk. You're no longer talking about something you don't know. You're talking about something that is a part of you, that is, you know exactly what you're saying. M, Rakal, Yogan, Latu, and the other devotees were entranced by these words of divine realization. Mr. Mukherjee and his friend were taking leave of the master, and after saluting him, they stood up. The master also stood up to show them courtesy. Mukherjee smiling, that you should stand up or sit down. Master smiling, but what's the harm? Water is water, whether it's placid or in waves. I'm like a cast-off leaf in the wind. The wind blows that leaf wherever it lists. I am the machine and God is its operator. Mr. Mukherjee and his friend left the room. M thought, according to the Vedanta, all is like a dream. All of these, the ego, the universe, and the living beings, unreal then? M had studied a little of the Vedanta. He also had read the German philosophers such as Kant and Hegel, whose writings are only a faint echo of the Vedanta. But Sri Ramakrishna did not arrive at his conclusions by reasoning, not through the mind, as do ordinary scholars. It was the divine mother of the universe who revealed the truth to him. It came to him from within. It came from him to him before senses and before mind. It was a knowing. It was an isness. It was the divine mother of the universe who revealed the truth to him. These were the thoughts that passed through M's mind.